It looked like any other garbage pickup until a K9 dog started barking so wildly that traffic stopped. When officers finally opened the hatch, what they found hidden inside turned an ordinary morning into a miracle no one would ever forget. Officer Daniels had driven the same suburban streets 100 times before. In this neighborhood, nothing ever seemed to happen. Just tidy lawns, the hum of leaf blowers, and kids waiting for the school bus. But he still checked every corner, his hand resting lightly on the head of his partner, Rex, who sat alert in the back seat. It was a bitter morning in early March, the kind that made your breath hang in the air like smoke. Daniel sipped lukewarm coffee and tried not to think about how many hours were left in his shift. Rex, however, was as focused as ever. The German Shepherd's dark eyes followed every movement outside the window, scanning for anything out of place. They were halfway down Maple Drive when Daniels noticed the garbage truck rumbling a few houses ahead. It made its slow, familiar crawl along the curb, stopping every few yards so the driver could jump out and toss in the week's refuse. "Nothing today, huh, boy?" Daniels murmured. He was about to roll the cruiser forward when Rex stiffened. At first, Daniels thought he'd imagined it, but then Rex's ears shot straight up, his muscles going rigid. "What is it?" Daniels asked, frowning. Rex didn't look at him. His gaze was locked on the garbage truck, body quivering with a tension Daniels hadn't seen in years. A shiver crawled up the officer's spine. Whatever had caught Rex's attention, it wasn't ordinary, and it wasn't good. Before Daniels could react, Rex let out a deep, urgent bark that echoed down the quiet street. It wasn't the sharp, alert bark he used for training exercises. This was different. Raw, frantic. "Rex, heel!" Daniels commanded, but the German Shepherd surged forward, nearly yanking the leash from his grasp as he opened the cruiser door. The garbage truck driver glanced back, startled. "Hey, what's going on?" he called over the roar of the engine. Rex ignored everything except the truck. He strained against the leash with such force that Daniels had to plant his boots to keep from being dragged along. The dog's barking grew faster, almost panicked. Neighbors peeked out of their doors. A woman in a robe clutched her coffee to her chest, her eyes wide. A man paused in his driveway, frowning in confusion. Daniels had worked with Rex long enough to know this wasn't a drill. Whatever had triggered him was real and urgent. "Hold up!" Daniels shouted to the driver. "Shut the engine off!" The driver hesitated, looking bewildered, but turned the key. The rumble died, replaced by Rex's relentless barking and the hush of unsettled silence. Daniels crouched beside Rex, pressing a hand to his flank. "Easy, buddy. Show me," he urged, voice steady even as his heart pounded. Rex pawed furiously at the truck's rear panel, his nose working the seams. He let out a low, desperate whine that sent a chill straight through Daniels' chest. Something, or someone, was inside. Daniels felt the air leave his lungs. He motioned urgently to the driver. "Open the back, now!" The man's hands trembled as he fumbled with the latch. Metal scraped against metal. The heavy rear door creaked open just enough to release a stale rush of air that smelled of old newspapers and sour milk. Rex leapt forward, his front paws landing on the edge of the truck bed. He plunged his nose into the clutter, sniffing with the fierce determination that had made him the best K9 on the force. Daniels climbed up beside him, the cold metal biting through his uniform pants. "What is it, boy?" Rex nosed aside a sagging trash bag, then another. His tail was stiff, hackles raised. When he reached a stained blanket wadded into the corner, he froze. A hush fell over the growing crowd of neighbors. Someone whispered, "Oh God!" Rex pressed his nose into the folds of the blanket, then looked up at Daniels with eyes so intent they nearly stopped his heart. Daniels swallowed hard. His hands felt numb as he crouched and began peeling back the layers of fabric. First one corner, then another. He braced himself for something he didn't dare name. When he pulled aside the last flap of cloth, he drew in a sharp breath. Nestled in the middle of the garbage was a tiny pink knit cap. Underneath it, the pale face of a baby, eyes closed, chest rising in weak, shallow breaths. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze around them. No one spoke. Even Rex stood perfectly still, his nose inches from the tiny, quivering bundle. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears as he reached down with both hands. The baby was lighter than he expected, her skin cold to the touch. A soft, strangled whimper escaped her lips. and the sound broke the spell that held them all motionless. "She's alive," he rasped, voice cracking. "Get an ambulance, now!" The driver stumbled backward, fumbling for his radio. Neighbors gasped and pressed hands to their mouths. A woman began to cry, her sobs muffled by her scarf. Daniels pulled the baby close to his chest, wrapping the edges of the blanket around her fragile body. She made a small, hitching sound, like the beginning of a cry that never quite formed. "It's okay," he whispered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "You're safe now." Rex whined and pressed his nose to the baby's cheek as if trying to lend her his own warmth. His tail wagged once, hesitant, hopeful. Daniels glanced down, meeting the dog's eyes. "Good boy," he breathed. "You did this." The baby shivered in his arms. With shaking hands, he shrugged out of his jacket and bundled her more securely. He didn't dare think how close she'd come to being crushed or lost forever. In the distance, sirens wailed to life, and Daniels pressed the baby tighter against his heart, silently willing her to hold on. The ambulance screeched to a stop just beyond the crowd. Two paramedics leapt out, their eyes going wide as they spotted Daniels standing in the back of the garbage truck, a tiny bundle pressed to his chest. "Infant, female," he called down hoarsely, voice cracking. "Hypothermic, shallow breathing." They rushed forward with an oxygen mask and a warming blanket. Daniels climbed down carefully, never loosening his hold. As soon as his boots hit the pavement, one paramedic slipped the mask over the baby's face, while the other checked her pulse with gloved fingers. "She's critical but stable," the medic said, his tone clipped and urgent. "We've got to go." Daniels nodded, fighting the sting in his eyes. He passed the baby over, his arms feeling suddenly too empty. Rex whined and circled them, his ears pinned back. "You did good, boy," Daniels whispered, resting a trembling hand on the dog's head. "You saved her." Neighbors stepped closer, some with tears on their cheeks. No one seemed to know what to say. They only watched as the medics loaded the baby into the ambulance, the door slamming shut behind them. The sirens wailed again, fading into the distance as the vehicle sped toward the hospital. For a long moment, Daniels and Rex stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by the evidence of what might have been. The trash, the torn blanket, the stunned faces. And for the first time in his career, Daniels felt something deeper than pride. He felt awe. The story spread faster than Daniels could have imagined. By evening, news vans lined the block. Cameras pointed at the garbage truck that had almost become a grave. Neighbors stood in small hushed circles, replaying the moment the baby was lifted into the ambulance. At the hospital, the baby, whom the nurses named Grace, began to stir beneath warm lights and gentle hands. A nurse called to tell Daniels she was going to survive. The relief hit so hard he had to sit down on the curb, his hands covering his face. When he finally looked up, Rex was there, pressing his broad head into his shoulder. "Good boy," Daniels murmured, voice thick. "I'll never doubt you again." Some heroes, he thought, simply had 4 paws and hearts big enough to save a life.